so some ML applications are already available as a service, right? Like for instance, if you look at things like text to speech, speech recognition, even some of the computer vision recognition technology, these are all available as a service, and it's all being streamlined. I think the way it happens in ML, in my opinion, is when a problem is a bit nebulous, it takes time, but then after a while, people understand the entire end-to-end and everything is nailed down, and then it starts becoming and graduating into a service. So that's why you're seeing some of these things have already become service. You can just call an API, and like if you want to do language translation, you don't have to do your own thing. Like, I mean, it's pretty not straightforward, but it is well understood, and that's why you can actually get it to an API. You don't have to build it on your, like if you want to do some closed caption in a movie, like you don't have to build your own closed caption, right? But some other like feed ranking and all, I think it will eventually become a service. Right now it is not, because there is a lot of heuristics that I use across the end-to-end system. So if you're running very large scale feed system like in ShareChat, I'm sure you do a lot of optimizations to minimize the cost, and there is multi-stage ranking, and then you tweaking different stages, and even the objectives are not very clear. And okay, well, I don't want spam, but I want to increase engagement. Well, no, but it's not a lot short-term engagement, it's more long-term. Well, but what are the indicators? And it is very tied to your UI as well. And then how do you understand your users? So there's a lot of these nuances that have to be customized, and that's what makes it.
Where you attend more stand-ups, you're talking about all the problems that we discuss every day.
Yeah. So this is again, I commonly refer to them as street fighting, right? So you always have to do the street fighting every day to make your system better. But and like a good example is video player, right? So if you want to do video encoding and video player in a Wi-Fi 5G network, you can use off-the-shelf thing, and it works. But like if you want to do good video player in a low network bandwidth thing, you cannot use open source. Like you have to do your custom player, right? So it's the same thing for feed and other things as well. Like it's for simple application, I think it should. I believe there are solutions available on the cloud, but as your application becomes as your applications become more nuanced, then you have to customize it to get the maximum bang for the buck. But yes, I mean, you will all see, in my opinion, each of these AI things becoming more mature, and they will all graduate into services over time. And then just as you use your Apple Watch, you will start using them as well. Like, but then new problems will come in, and then those will take more time. And so it's a graduation process. You know, you start with the problem, and then it becomes well understood, and then it graduates into a service. Like 10 years ago, speech to text was not an API. Like, I mean, there were a lot of nuances, and everyone was building, like IBM was building their own thing, Model 1, Model 2, Model 3, Model 6. Every version was different. It was not easy, right? And so, but now it is easy, right? With the deep learning stuff that's automated the whole thing, and it's very well understood, right? Yeah, so privacy is something that you have to think as a principle when you're building product. It is not just about ML, right? Like when you're dealing with your data end to end, you have to start thinking of that as a principle when you're developing your product, because privacy, as we all know, is like something can be, it gets breached based on the weakest link. So when you are, my principle is don't use more than what you need, right? I mean, so if there is some information that you don't think you need, don't store it in your training data. Like you're just kind of increasing your risk. I think nowadays with all the deep learning and all the transformations that you do kind of are by definition. So that's one fortunate thing, like all these embeddings and other things, they by definition are privacy preserving, right? So I don't think there's a big problem there. The problem happens when you are dealing with your data management system, right? So in the data management system, that is where you have to ensure that you are thinking about privacy and do not use information that will discriminate against users. Like, okay, if you are using gender and all that, like, okay, you have to ask yourself, is that kind of creating non-inclusivity in your product, right? And so that's more like a business decision. And again, this again goes back to the objectives you're optimizing. Like if you blindly optimize for short-term engagement, in many cases, you kind of start getting into this issue. But if you start thinking long-term, you might get a lot of clicks and shares in the short term, but you will alienate a particular population of your product and then they will not come back, right? But if you start thinking of more inclusivity from the very beginning, then that population will grow and that's going to give you more growth in the future. And so that's the mindset. And so it's not just machine learning, it's also very deep product thinking. Like every company needs to have a point of view of how they're building the product, and then machine learning can only help you achieve that strategic goal. Machine learning cannot be used to grow your product over 10 years. Like that's a hard problem. I don't think machine learning can solve that, right? So it has to be all baked into the objective and your data management systems, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I think from my privacy preserving machine learning research team, right, using that hat, I want to challenge that deep learning models are by definition privacy preserving, because that's not true. It's been shown, like at least for images and also in text, that you could seriously breach some of the training data if you know how the training, like if you're aware of, so there's privacy by obscurity because you don't know the training process. But if you do know that, then there's like different models by which you could breach some of this. So there are some issues there, but I completely agree with the product first approach, right? So where, like for instance, for something like a Pinterest or a ShareChat or a Watch that we have, it's almost like we don't have friend connections. We don't have too much static information that we collect from the users. It's by definition privacy friendly because it's mostly what you do on the platform that decides like what your feed is going to look like. None of the other data, like your date of birth or like your location or something, is not something that we absolutely require for the feed ranking itself, right? So I completely agreed on that part.
Yeah, like at Pinterest, we spend a lot of time building what is called inclusive AI, right? So like if you are looking for, if you do some search, fall fashion, we don't want to show you only result of white skinned people, right? Like, so how do we create more diversity? And so our computer vision systems, we have ensured, like I think the biggest needle mover was when you're collecting your training data, you ensure that there is enough diversity in your training data. And that kind of ensures eventually that you are building a more inclusive recommender system. Some of these aspects might get lost when you're doing these recommender systems, but they become very important factors in the long run, right? And so that's the kind of thing you have to identify. There are some factors where you have to intentionally include them in your objective functions. And there are others which you will always learn over time. Like you won't be able to figure out every aspect of inclusivity and fairness, but like if you know that there are some that does have an impact on your user base, then that needs to be included in your objective function as well.